Hello, and thank you for joining me. Does your teenager need to argue every single little thing? If you are so frustrated and uncertain why this is happening, you are in the right place. I am going to cover why this happens and how you can get out of this negative cycle with your teenager. And all right, we're going to jump in. So thank you again for joining me. My name is Allie Payne. I am a certified life coach, certified relationship systems coach, and I work with parents and teens to help them close the emotional gap and end the painful disconnection and better understand each other. Today, again, I'm talking about why does your teenager need to argue everything? Okay, let's jump in. Teenagers are confused and frustrated, like generally speaking, confused and frustrated. And they have a negative bias. So it already puts teenagers in a bit of like an angsty kind of sort of place, okay? That's just normal for teenagers because of their brain development. And I know I've said it a million times, but I'm going to tell you a slightly different way of looking at it this time that was shared with me with Dr. Cam at Teen Translator here, who's a colleague of mine. And I love the way she said this. So I want to share this with you. So in early science, there was thought to only be one brain development stage, which was as a toddler, okay? And they were developing language and thought skills, but at a simpler level. It's now been proven that there are two brain development stages, and the second happens in adolescence. But here's the fascinating part that she told me yesterday. Is really cool. In adolescence, the brain is actually densifying. So it truly is the physiological explanation of it's going from simple brain to super complicated brain, okay? It's actually densifying and it gets more complex. Now, this is really unsettling as a teenager. Like literally they know there's something happening to them, but they don't know sort of what it is. And a lot of teenagers, when they actually are told this, when teenagers are actually given the information is one of the reasons why they feel so angsty and frustrated and is that because their brain is densifying and it's physically changing. Do you know how empowering that is for teenagers? Most teenagers actually think they are broken, that they're going crazy. Like they actually think in their mind they're losing their minds. And it is extremely unsettling for them. So I want you to just be patient with that for a moment too. They truly believe there's something wrong with them. And I don't know about you, but I'd think that was a little bit frightening as well. Okay, so there's that. So the densification happens randomly. Ooh, awesome. And it's creating complex thoughts and feelings and critical analysis, independent decision making, and a whole lot of other stuff. So right now, I hope you're listening and you're here. Okay, here's the part I want you to take. If you listen to one thing, if you take away one thing and you just turn off your phone after this, I'm totally fine with it. Here it is. Are you ready? Teenagers argue because in the densification of their brain and the formation of complex thought, process, critical analysis, independent decision making, they are arguing with you to like put up, okay, so I want you to see it this way. Oops, sorry. Nature is building a whole lot of scaffolding. You know, like when a building is being built and there's a whole lot of scaffolding being put in? Okay, nature is doing that. When they are arguing with you, they are using critical thought. Arguing is their way of developing critical thought that fills in all the spaces between all of the scaffolding. Arguing is a raw form of critical analysis, decision making, determining their beliefs, determining their values. You are simply getting the raw and unfiltered version. And here's the other part I want you to hear. They argue with you because you are their safe place. They argue with you out of respect. I know, you're like, what? You've lost your mind, Allie. No, hang in there. They argue with you out of respect because they are trying to develop all of this new, like the software. They're getting the hardware. Nature's giving them the hardware. But they are on their own device to fill in all the software and to fill in all the gaps. And arguing with you is because they trust your opinion. They trust what you think. They trust your perspective in the world. You're a trusted person for them. So they are arguing with you because you're trusted. So they want to but what about this? But why this? But how come this? But why do you do it that way? But why do we have to do? Because you're the trusted person they want to use as a reflection of how they are going to build all of the filled in scaffolding in their life. My kids' scaffolding must be tall and intensely. Melissa, that's the best line ever. I love you. That's crazy talk. I love it right now. Can't even oh my gosh, that's amazing. Okay. So that's awesome. So, yes. Now remember though, okay, so you've got this need. There is a natural physiological need for them to fill in all of the gaps in the scaffolding as their brain is densifying. Okay. And here's the not as nice part about that and I've said this before, is that their amygdala, their emotional brain is fully formed, right? By the time they're about 12, you're dealing with this whole upper part, the upper brain, the impulse control that is not fully formed, all the intellectual reasoning that you already have. It's why you don't need to go around in your world asking everyone, well, why do you do that? Well, that's dumb. I never thought, well, I don't thought it. You don't have to do that because you already have intellectual reasoning and have determined a lot of, for you, what feels right, what feels wrong, your belief system. You don't have to do that. Your teen doesn't have that. Okay. But what they also have is this emotional brain that is a little raw and unfiltered. It's unfiltered. Okay. And it's not quite as covered and protected as they want to be. So you've got this need to argue because they are developing all of this critical thinking and processing, but you also have a raw emotional center. You've got a bit of a raw emotion. So you're getting the negative bias, which is another reason why a lot of this questioning, they can't just, okay, let's face it. Wouldn't it be awesome if your teenager came to you and just was like, will you please explain to me in the most loving manner how you decided that you wanted to be this way and why does life come with this? Thank you, Mom or Dad. That was lovely. Okay, bye. Yeah, no. Good try though. That'll never happen because they automatically have a negative bias anyway. And that's why this questioning of life that is coming kind of at you sounds a little snarkier and argue like, well, that's dumb. Why do we have to do it that way? I mean, that's stupid. Like, oh, really? Oh my gosh. Because they are doing all of this questioning and critical thought thinking with a negative bias at the same friggin' time. I know, where was the small print on that when you took this kid home? Like really, it's hard enough. My kids arguing is somewhat disrespectful, unfortunately, sometimes. Yes, you're right. And it's going to come across that way. Okay, so let me keep going on this and I'm going to address some of that as well, okay? They have a simple foundation, as I said, and their brain is creating this really complex framework. So the verbal arguing that you're getting is the way that they are trying to fill in all of these gaps that are there because of this new created framework. And it's fundamentally necessary. It is fundamentally necessary for them to go through this phase to become a fully functioning human or adult. Yes, there's ways you can be around this, but just a minute. I'm just giving you one piece at a time, okay? So it sounds a lot like, to your point, like talking back, rude, saucy, they needing to be right, constantly asking why, full of opinions that you never asked for. Can I get an amen? Right? The other day, her arguing with me, she yelled, "Oh boy, yeah, that's a rough one. That is a rough one." And it's normal. The yelling, the shut up, the I don't care what you think. Yes, yes. Okay. Here's the other thing I want you to understand about arguing. Everything. This is going to be, this is the one where you're going to truly look at me like I have 6 heads. So sometimes their arguing is an attempt to connect with you, because being in that space of critical thought and, yes, yeah, well, what about that? No, like sometimes being in that is actually a bit of a dopamine, like it's a bit of a pleasure center thing for them, because not filling in the scaffolding and gaps is wildly unsettling. Filling in the gaps feels safer. It's building intellectual safety along with emotional safety, okay? So when they are arguing or like baiting you, how many of you have had the baiting conversation where your teenager just arrives in the room and says something kind of random and you're like, I don't know how to respond to that? And it doesn't matter what you say, literally doesn't matter what you say. We're down a rabbit hole in an argument so fast you don't even know what hit you, but it was a lot like riding downhill on a bike with no brakes and you ran into a full-size cactus. Can anybody give me a like for that? Like, what now? Okay, these baiting conversations that hook you into an argument or like a, oh yeah, come on at me kind of thing. They're attempting to engage with you and connect. I know it's like, wow, when did that become, when did that become normal and okay? No, right? It's okay, exactly. You too, you got it. They don't know how to engage with you in a way that sounds super intellectually involved and, hi, mom or dad, want to just have a conversation? That would be great. Will you tell me more about you? I'd love to get to know you. No, they don't have that. And expecting them to have that is ludicrous. So it will for sure drive you crazy. So just let's let go of that expectation for sure. Yes, it also, that's a great point. Thank you so much. Brisbane, Australia. Yes, this is same-sex parent is where you get more of the arguing. Now, the irony is you might have a son who seems to be closer and get along more with his mom, but argues more with his dad. Because his dad is the one his brain is trying to model after. I think it was Dr. Phil that said something like our brains want to model 98% of our same-sex parent. And I know we didn't all grow up with a mom or a dad or, and whatever, that's not right or wrong. But yes, so your daughter, if you have a daughter, they may get along better with the dad and argue more with the mom because it's a same-sex parent. And so they're looking to model that. Like, I know, this is the thing, is their brains make up, I'm supposed to look and sound like you, but I don't want to. So somehow I'm just going to argue it until, like, what now? And unless, like, it's almost like we need to release them and say, look, you don't have to be like me. You don't have to think like me. You don't have to agree with me. So I'll be in this argument with you, like I'll be in this conversation with you. But you kind of like let them off the hook a little bit. Okay. Yeah. Flex intelligence. Oh yes, absolutely. Now that's the other thing. Thank you so much, JJMC025, for pointing that out. That is another reason why teenagers do this, is teenagers truly believe, and this is a wonderful perspective. From your teenager's perspective, adolescent, young adult, they know everything. I am going to out myself right now. I was that young adult. I remember I actually sat my aunt down and I told her all about why people were the way they were, why she was the way she was, because I was doing my own healing and personal development at the time, and I was reading into, patterns and toxicity. Yeah, I filled her in the whole thing about what she should know because I was so woke. Yeah. She totally called me out at my wedding in the she did the toast to the bride, and she made so much fun of it. She's so lovely. I love her. But it was so funny. Like, I literally thought I knew everything. And so, yes, adolescence goes well into 20s. Absolutely. So that's why I'm saying young adults. So just remember that from their perspective, they do know a lot more than you about what it's like to be a teen. They know a lot more what it's like to have their lens on the world. I remember what it was like to be a teen, but do I viscerally know what it's like to be a teen anymore? No, I don't. I've been indoctrinated with the parent juice. So I'm not over there in the teen Kool-Aid anymore. And there's a way that we got to hold their perspective and they think they're right about everything, and they are right about their part of the world. Okay, so I want to go further into this because I want to make sure that I give you actual tools, okay? Mine actually told me, you're right. I know it's not a competition, but your teenager needs to feel right. That it's validating for the critical thoughts that they're putting in there. So anyway, okay, I'm going to get into this. I don't want to get too off track. Okay. I want to thank you all for commenting because I literally love when you engage with me because I miss people so desperately much right now. That's why I love doing these. So thank you for engaging and for all your comments. I love it. Thank you for being here. Okay. So here's how this gets set up. Here's how one of the ways that this gets set up and turns into a power struggle. An exhausting and frustrating one for both you and your teenager, right? Okay. First of all, as parents, we get used to, when your child is younger, up until about 10-ish, 8 to 10, it depends on your child, you get used to having a certain level of influence over them. You are more involved in their decision making. They bounce more stuff off you. You have more input in their life. Sadly, the small print that said to your ego, because, okay, I'm not calling names here. I'm a control freak. I friggin' loved that level of their life. My kids were independent enough. They could get dressed. They could make basic meals. But they asked me everything. They wanted to share everything. It was like the perfect time in life. They hadn't gotten sassy yet. There was a real sweet spot in there that my ego loved. And then guess what happens, right? Puberty happens. Their brain starts changing. I get a little pissy as a parent because if you're used to having this level of friendship and connection and influence and input in their life, and now all of a sudden as an adolescent or as a tween, a prepubescent, a kind of teenager, you get more one of those fingers, because they don't want your input anymore. They don't want to share everything with you, and it can feel like a giant sense of rejection. So here's what ends up happening. It triggers your fight or flight, like any argument or disagreement, particularly when your brain has been accustomed to a particular way of being around them. You're accustomed to a particular response with them. And all of a sudden it's not that way. It goes like this. You did what? Did you just say that to me? Do you not know who I am? I am your, right? And we go into this thing because I don't know about you, but our brains are wired to feel validated. We love feeling important. We love feeling that we matter. We love influence. That's our ego. And it's not a bad thing, whatever. It is what it is. We get used to this. So when we don't get it, we go into a state of fight or flight. How do you think this is going to roll out, right? You are now in a state of fight or flight, which is just simply that kind of heightened, you can feel yourself going into defensive, offensive, needing to be right, which is our brains. It's a brain wiring thing. So you're in a slight state of fight or flight response, but wait for it. Because your teenager's brain isn't quite fully formed, they are in fight or flight, that nice edgy defensiveness, a lot, because their impulse control is not fully formed. Their intellectual reasoning is not fully formed. So your teenager is already in a more active and heightened sense of fight or flight. Oh, good. So now the two of you get in the same room. Your teenager is doing this arguing thing while they are developing the complex thought, emotions, thought process, blah, 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 all this stuff going on in their brain. You are a little bit hurt and feeling rejected, quite frankly, because this teenager doesn't want all of your input anymore and you don't always get to be right. In fact, they seem hell-bent on telling you how wrong you are. So your fight or flight gets triggered. Now you guys are dealing with each other's fight or flight response. How well do you think that goes? I'm pretty sure every single one of you can tell me. It turns into a greater argument. And now you're in a power struggle and a negative cycle that you just want to find a stop button. Like, how do you get off of that carousel, please? Right? Can I get a yeah in the comments? It's yes, instantly bad. Okay. So you got two things going on there. Your teenager just wants to be right. It is a necessary part of their own building need for independence. So when you can understand what I've just, even if you hang up right now, if you just understand the few things that I just said, why arguing happens, okay, like physiologically, scientifically, why arguing is happening. But number two, when you guys are both in your fight or flight state, they are just trying to flex some independent thought and they just want to be right a little bit. Do you see how this ends up going around and around? And this is how it perpetuates. Okay. So if you're in fight or flight, that's not going to help. You are the adult. You are the parent. You do have intellectual reasoning. You do have impulse control. You do have advanced thought processes that your teenager does not. So expecting your teenager to be the one to step off this carousel first. Okay, well, let me know how that goes. But you might have a lot of gray hair by the time that happens. It's not going to work, all right? Your brain is wired for the same need to be right as theirs is. The problem is your brain has more time, more experience being right. And so it's more accustomed to being right with your teenager because they used to come and ask you for input. So now the relationship with your teenager isn't the place for you to exercise that level of influence, and it's not the place if you're looking to feel right or validated. It's not with your teenager anymore. And I want to honor and acknowledge the feeling of rejection and loss that is very real around that as a parent. And I want to support you to get whatever help you need to process those very real emotions. It is okay to not be okay with this stage. To get a counselor, a coach, a therapist, a good friend, a family member, whatever. But I do, please hear this. Do not process those emotions with your teenager. That won't work. It'll be like a wet blanket on a newly emerging flame. And it will turn into guilt, shame, toxicity, all things you didn't intend, because those feelings for you are very real. So I want to support you to get help and process those if necessary. It comes down to, thank you, exactly. This comes down to about arguing over opinion. I don't know about you, but that's a no-win. It's a no-win. And since when was this about winning? I'm just going to say. Okay. All right. As a parent, we become emotionally attached to this level of influence, which looks like for your teenager being right. Oh, you just always need to be right. Oh, you just can't handle that you're not right. And that's where you get the shut up. I don't want to talk to you. I don't care what you think. and all of the other quite hurtful statements that you have probably heard. And my heart is reaching out to your heart, because that is hard to hear. So here's what I want to say that you can do to back down from this. First of all, being right isn't parenting. I'm sorry if that's the first time you've heard this. Being right is not parenting. Are you arguing about an opinion or a belief or a value? Because those also aren't right. They're like, every human being is born with a different set of those, and just because you birthed or raised a child does not mean that they are going to believe or agree with you at all. It does not mean that. And that's also very, very difficult for parents to come to terms with. I was that child. I believed wildly differently than my parents. I had very different values. That's what made me the black sheep. And unfortunately, of course, all of this wasn't known back then. So instead, I was just constantly argued with I was made to feel wrong. And that's what ends up happening when you choose to engage in these arguments without understanding what's happening, without knowing like what's going on under the surface, and you engage in the argument. Arguments by nature mean that someone needs to be right and someone needs to be wrong. Even though I know that that's not what you mean. Like when someone's baiting you or coming at you, like what's the first, you go into offense or defense, whatever it is, but you're playing in the game. You're on the same field, okay? Teenagers desperately want the acknowledgement for their level of woke, their level of intellect, their level of maturity, that of course is less than yours, of course, for their growing like worldliness, their intelligence. They want validation that they're maturing. Their brain needs that validation. So by holding an argument as someone needs to be right and someone needs to be wrong, even if that's not what you're intending, your teenager essentially is feeling made wrong. And that's another reason why your teenager's coming at you more often. Teenagers will come at you when they feel like there isn't room for them to be right. So I'm going to ask you, what would it take for you to let go of whatever your teenager is saying and just listen? And instead of making it an argument or a discussion, maybe your side isn't as necessary as what you were hoping. Maybe your side is about saying, that's an interesting perspective. Tell me more about that. Or, yeah, that's cool. So, like, where did you learn that? Or what makes you think that? Cool. Like, literally, don't engage. Don't engage. Just validate and listen. Like, there's a difference between needing to be right about a value and a belief or an opinion, or like a moral conversation. And even a lot of moral conversations are underlying in differing beliefs. Let your teenager be different than you. Let them be right. Here's another reason why teenagers will come at you and go through, and this argument stage, which is a natural development of the densification of their brains, okay, is when teenagers feel unheard. The teenager will argue more and more and more. And I know this sounds crazy, but here's the demonstration. A teenager comes to you to tell you how right they are about something. I don't know, because they know everything about everything, right? Okay, great. They come to you and they say that. Your first response as a parent is be like, well, that's not really the way it is, because this is how, you see, your teenager instantly feels made wrong and unheard. And so even though that's not how you intended it, your teenager's probably going to get on that argument bandwagon quickly, because now their fight or flight is engaged. Yours isn't. You think you're in a conversation or a discussion. Their fight or flight is engaged because they feel made wrong and unheard. So to the degree that you can hear them out, even if you don't agree, none of this has to do with agreeing with them. None of it. I know that wasn't in the small print either. None of it has to do with agreeing with them. If they come to you to tell you something and you just listen or ask curious questions, that's it. They get to feel right, but more importantly, they get to feel heard. And this happens particularly with parents around setting boundaries. I don't want to make this a whole thing about boundaries because I talk about it in a lot of other conversations. But when you set a boundary that's right for you, and your teenager comes to you and it sounds like they're talking back or they're trying to argue the boundary. And so you go into defensive mode and you're like justifying the boundary and justifying why that's you. Yeah, like I get it, for sure. I get that. Your teenager is going to keep arguing that boundary because they just want to feel heard. Them coming to you and arguing a boundary doesn't mean you need to change your mind. Doesn't mean you need to change anything, except having an open mind to hear them. Sometimes they're not there to actually question or diss you or the boundary. They're there because they just are, like I said in the beginning, they are processing all of their new critical thinking and independent thought around this boundary. And so they need to kind of box with it for a little bit. And they're still on side with the boundary. They just needed to box with it. That's all. And so when you can hear your teenager out, when they feel heard, they are a lot less likely to argue everything. All right, moving on. The other thing that this arguing does, which is an insidious little toxic thing that, wow, I wish I was told this at so much earlier. Man, I just giant hot mess failed at this one, if there is such a thing. Parenting, right? It's a giant human experiment, so it's hard to say that there really is failing when you were barely told how to get this thing out of your body, let alone given a manual on how to raise it. So I don't know how we label anything right or wrong, but whatever. If you are constantly engaging in the argument with your teenager, okay? And because that's what they do. Remember, this is how they develop critical thinking in their brains, is through debate. Maybe that's a better way for us to frame it, is through debate, okay? When you get into the argument with them and now both of your fight or flight responses are up, what you're modeling is needing to be right. I come from generations of need to be right people. Anyone else want to raise their hand on that? Give me a me too. Yeah, I come from generations of needing to be right. And here's part of the problem with that. Studied. My dad, his dad, my father-in-law, my husband actually have extremely high IQs. Like are wildly, like skipped 2-3 grades. Like, I mean, super, super smart. The smarter people are, the harder it is to not be right. Because their brains are like, yeah, but no, I know. Yeah, but I know you know. Your teenager doesn't care that you know. Your teenager is developing their own way of knowing. So the more that you argue, what you model for them is needing to be right. And when anyone needs to be right, someone has to be wrong. And that will ensure, first of all, at first, more arguing. Because your teenager just wants to feel right every now and then as well. That's all. Small task, really. But over the long term, they will remove. Because they eventually make up, whether it's true or not. You don't listen. They never get an opportunity to be heard and be right. They don't feel validated. And you just don't listen to them, or you brush them off or whatever. And so they just literally just vacate. So I'm going to tell you right now, before you get all angry about the arguing, if your teenager is arguing with you, amen. High five. When they don't argue with you, that's when you've crossed into another level of needing relationship help. When they stop arguing with you, you have bigger fish that we got to catch and unpack and have a look at. So you be glad that they are coming to engage, even if it sounds like constant arguing, because at least they are seeing you as a trusted person. They want to bounce things off of you because they respect how you think, how you do the world, how you see the world. Okay? And people look to others who are most important to them for their greatest validation. And they're looking to you for validation, that they might know something, that the way they're seeing things might have some validity. Okay? So I want you to remember that. Here's how I like to think about it. If someone, have any of you ever practiced tennis? You know, where you go to the wall and like it's just you with your racket and the tennis ball, and you're bouncing the ball, you're hitting the ball against the wall, right? And the ball bounces back. And so you just that's how you practice tennis, right? Have you ever seen anybody do that? Have you ever done that? Okay, maybe just me. I used to do it as a teenager all the time. So you bounce this thing against the wall and you get it back. That's you. Just be the wall. Be the wall that just lets them bounce the ball back and forth. At no point are you required to pick up the ball and chuck it back at them. You don't need to. Just be the wall. I don't mean be the wall as in be completely emotionally devoid and unavailable. I just mean be the wall. Just let them bounce that ball back and forth off you and practice. They're practicing tennis. That's what they're doing. They're heading for Wimbledon, They're going for full-on human. So just let them bounce the ball off you. You don't need to pick it up and throw it back and be like, how dare you throw the ball at me? That's their job, okay? I'm glad, Cheryl. You know what? I thought about it last night. It was the only thing I can think of. I am a wildly visual person, so metaphors are kind of my jam, but they don't always work for everybody. So just be the wall. That's it. They've come to you to practice. They're not going anywhere else. They came to you, and that is a good thing. All right? Okay, the moment you push back, you are both in fight or flight, and I guarantee you will get more and more conflict, and it will get toxic, okay? I'm just looking at my notes here because I want to make sure I covered everything. All right, there's a quote that I love by Rumi, and it says something like this. I'm probably going to butcher it. I'm sorry. Out in the field, beyond right and wrong, is where you'll find me. I want to invite you as parents to come into a place at this stage with your teenager, to let go of the black and white. Someone has to be right, therefore someone has to be wrong. If you love being right, like me, I know, control freak. If you love being right, you go find a place where you can be right that is constructive and adds value. Because being right with your teenager, which at some point did add value and it was constructive because they were looking to you for input as little kids and they wanted to share everything with you. That's not the place anymore. Go find another relationship to go and find that need to be right, which is normal and human, okay? Just don't try and do that with your parents, or with your teenager, I'm sorry. It's good practice for parents to listen more, get curious, ask questions. Hey, I'm so cool. And you know what? Thanks for sharing is another great thing, because remember, they want to be right about how woke they are and how much they know about the world and how little you do. So just make them right. Be like, dude, thanks for sharing. I didn't know that. Or it wasn't like that when I was a teen. Or you can also just say, I love you enough to not engage. If what they're coming at you with feels very aggressive, very toxic, you can say, I love you enough to not engage like this. I want to have a conversation with you. I want to hear what you have to think. This feels a little bit edgy for me, and I don't want to fight with you. So can you come back in like 5 or 10? Do you want to try again? Set that emotional boundary. That is safe. It's honoring, because now instead of modeling being right, you're modeling, I want to hear you. You're modeling, let's do this in a way that feels safe for both of us. You're modeling, I don't think this is going to go to a good place, but you're important enough to me. I'm going to check back with you in 10 minutes. I'm not just going to give you the nope, talk to the hand, okay? So model that instead. And remember, okay, let's just checking my notes. I want to make sure, yes, I covered everything. Remember that your teenager is processing this new densification in their brain, and they need to argue things to develop critical thinking, analysis, strategic thought, independent thoughts and beliefs, and they want to do it with someone they love, trust, and believe in, and that's you. And that's why teenagers are coming to you. I want to thank you so much for being here with me today and for listening. If this is interesting to you, follow me. You can hit the link in my profile and click on Connect for weekly tips. I send out a lot of this every single Tuesday, all of the what's happening, how does it feel, what's going on, and the what you can do about it on a weekly basis so that you can feel more equipped as a parent, and because it's hard, let's face it, and that you feel like you're not kind of out there straggling. I also have, if you hit the link in my profile, I have a free Facebook community. Just hit the round circle that says community. Head on over there. I'm in there all the time. I love connecting with and helping parents, and I'm answering questions and doing that all the time. So head on over there, and I will see you soon, if not next week. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful Mother's Day weekend. I celebrate and honor all of you mamas here, all of you parents who are doing the very best you can, and please know that you are not alone. Mwah. Bye, everybody.